I love to sketch. A lot of my research
Mm.
ideas, just like kind of take like a pen and like a journal and just go ahead and sketch. And that could be usually for me, I'm a little more of like a logical kind of person. It's usually like they're usually diagrams or flowcharts. Sounds kind of boring, but it's definitely for me. It's like it really gets me to like think differently. I know a lot of others, they enjoy just like generally drawing, and that's great for them. And then, of course, one of my favorite things to do is listen to music. I'm one of the biggest audiophiles that you'll ever meet.
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. Oh, well, I want to say welcome to my Learning to Swim guest today, who is Chinmay Surpur. And he is we've already talked about the fact that I sometimes mispronounce things, so feel free to correct me at any time.
No yeah.
But you are a recent graduate of UC Santa Barbara, and you got a bachelor's of science in biopsychology, and you are currently getting your PhD in clinical psychology.
Yep.
So lots of school, and then in addition to that, you're also the director of research at Yoga Bharati.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
Yoga Bharati.
Bharati. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But I first and foremost, I want to say welcome and thank you for spending this time with us today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I know we rescheduled a couple of times because things got busy, but thank you for keeping up with me. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we had connected and had talked several months ago. And one of the reasons why I wanted to grab you as a Learning to Swim guest is because Learning to Swim is a very casual interview series where we're exploring our own journey, whether it be professionally or personally, or how those are intertwined, and really highlighting how there is no one path and there is no one way of getting it right. So to that end, I like to always jump in with a super easy question, which is, what is your definition of failure?
Personally, I would say just unhappiness, and not even unhappiness, discontent. That is my definition of failure. And obviously, I could go deep into that, what I mean by discontent, but for the most part, just generally being at a point of being comfortable with yourself, being comfortable with your mind, and just being generally happy.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. And so then what is your definition? And maybe you'd be willing to share a story from your own life around what does resilience look like, or what is your definition of resilience?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, resilience is just a matter of, there's so many synonyms for it, but I would say determination, perseverance together really are what makes resilience. Willpower is a part of that, but of course, for that, I think it really takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of hard work to be resilient, and most importantly, I think just you have to be willing to be accepting of failure. So rejection and failure are going to be coming no matter what. There's like I like to say like 95% of the things you're trying for, you're going for either personally or in your career, you're probably going to fail or get rejected, and that's totally okay because it makes the 5% that much better, and that's normal.
Yes. And so I always think of one of the components that I think of when I'm considering how I want to be in the world and how I want to engage with others, and also how to keep myself from, being stagnant
Mhm.
or closed off, is remaining curious and having a curiosity
Exactly.
with it, with outlook with the world. And so what do you kind of, how do you foster curiosity within yourself?
So personally, I mean, that's a great question. Um, I'm currently, so as you previously mentioned, I'm doing my PhD in clinical psychology. With that kind of inherently involves a lot of reading, not just for school, but even just to enrich my own worldview, get a better understanding of how to even conduct like research, understand and notice phenomenology, and things like that. Just generally, I've had to, I spend a lot of time reading, and that almost always inspires a good amount of creativity for me. I also like to, I'm just a researcher by heart and profession, including a therapist, but I love to sketch. A lot of my research
Mm.
ideas, just like kind of take like a pen and like a journal and just go ahead and sketch. And that could be, usually for me, I'm a little more of like a logical kind of person. It's usually like they're usually diagrams or flowcharts. Kind of sounds kind of boring, but it's definitely, for me, it's like it really gets me to like think differently. I know a lot of others, they enjoy just like generally drawing, and that's great for them. And then, of course, one of my favorite things to do is listen to music. I'm one
Mm.
of the biggest audiophiles that you'll ever meet. Yeah, I actually just, as of yesterday, bought another speaker. I have a problem. I love listening to music, all types of music, especially hip hop, and that's probably my favorite genre. I've been listening to music since I was like 3 or 4, and I also play some instruments and sing. So for me, I love playing music. And then finally, just always learning. That's really what keeps me interested and kind of engaged. So I like learning new languages, refreshing on languages that I already know. I know a couple, so it's nice to keep learning.
Right.
So that's what I would say. It's the best way for me to be creative.
So how do you, I've got so many questions to ask about this, but I just want to start with, you mentioned that you speak other languages, and so you also speak, tell us which languages you speak.
So I speak my mother tongue. I actually didn't learn English until I was about 4. I have a funny story about that. But my mother tongue is Kannada. So I know it's a South Indian language,
Okay.
from Karnataka, the state of Karnataka, and Bangalore is located there. But Kannada is my mother tongue, so I know that fluently, conversationally fluently. And then I've learned Sanskrit for about 10 or 12 years of my life. So I can read and write the Devanagari script, which is the same script that's used for Hindi as well,
Mhm.
which is another Indian language. So that I can read and write Hindi as well, but I can only understand that, not speak it. I can understand it thoroughly though. And then finally, Spanish, I'm proficient in completely. So
And so I have kind of a very anecdotal, and it's an extremely small sample size, but kind of theory about the relationship in terms of kind of proficiency with foreign languages and music. Do you see those as some?
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I've actually looked into some literature about this as well. Like I said, I enjoy just spending some time on Google Scholar, but there is definitely a sort of like a sort of relationship between starting either languages or music at a young age, and having the ability to both pick up languages and pick up music, like I either or, for starting like for the rest of your life. So for me, I'm thankful since that I spoke Kannada only for the first 4 years of my life before I went to preschool, because now it's easier for me to learn any language and pronounce almost any language. But yeah, the funny thing was, my when I was in preschool, the first week I was there, the teacher thought that I didn't know that I had like some sort of learning disability, and because I just wasn't speaking English. But so they told my dad that, and my dad was like, "Oh, that's so weird. We don't think so. He started speaking when he was 6 months old."
Oh my
So I was
gosh.
like, I was speaking very young.
Yeah.
And he was like, he said, well, just why don't you give him another week and then you'll see. And then another week later, I was apparently the most talkative kid in class. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of like, I'm grateful for whatever genetics that is, for whatever my parents helped me in terms of raising me to speak like multiple languages, going out of their way to teach me. My mom went out of her way a lot to teach me Sanskrit, which was really beneficial. It's a very logical and mathematical language, although it's starting to become a dead language, although it's being revived now. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of it's very interesting to be learning languages.
Well, and that was going to be another question I had, is because I was going to ask you about Sanskrit. And my question, and I honestly, I feel a little embarrassed to ask this, but is my perception of Sanskrit is that it isn't necessarily a living language. And so can you describe what I mean, and I guess my familiarity with Sanskrit is through mantras and
Yeah.
a meditative practice.
Yeah, I'd love to explain that. So there are actually two types of Sanskrit nowadays, like in this decade, or in the century. What I would say is, one is the spoken language Sanskrit, which a lot of linguistic like linguists and activists have been making an effort since like pre-colonial and post-colonial times in India to kind of bring back or there are a couple of organizations that work to teach people the spoken language, and that's been ramping up exponentially since I was born. At least I know it was going on before that too, but now it's you can go online and find a course to learn spoken Sanskrit. So that is one side. And then there's the chanting that you just mentioned. So that's called Vedic. That's more of like that's scriptural Sanskrit. So the Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, all of these are like ancient texts. They're all in written Sanskrit, in scriptural Sanskrit. So a lot of those it's the same language technically. It's just a lot harder to understand. It's like going from reading like, Roald Dahl to like going ahead and reading like Aldous Huxley or something, right? It's like there's gonna be a huge difference, but or even for that matter, like reading the Bible. Yeah, so the second portion, which is just learning, if you want to learn the Sanskrit for the actual for the scriptures, then there's a Gurukulam system, and a lot of places where you would end up essentially submitting your like your childhood and your learning years to going to a like an ashram, like where like a learned man, like a sage or a guru will be he or she, they will be passing on their generational knowledge for years. That's just what their family line does. So they host these like quote schools where they teach the Vedas and these scriptural texts. So, and part of that is they have to learn Sanskrit.
Okay. Well,
So it's not
thank you.
entirely dead yet.
Okay.
Or actually, I shouldn't say yet. It's not. It was at one point like kind of dying, but now it's like even spoken. It's like completely back. But no one actively speaks it in cities like conversationally. It's more of like select groups of people just like who want to keep it alive. So we're hoping to make that more popular. Hindi is the national language of India, although that's also starting to change to English now, but whatever. It is what it is. It's colonialism.
Yeah, well, and then part of what you mentioned was just your love of reading, and so I was reading an article recently that was talking about, because I tend to read kind of both fiction and nonfiction, And I really, sometimes I feel a little guilty about reading fiction. And then of course I
I
found an
love
article.
fiction.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, because I found this article that I think it was, Harvard Business Review that said, reading fiction is good for you. And it actually,
It is.
there's a place for it. So you read fiction too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like, you watch a TV show and it's kind of it's interesting, right? Like if you watch, like, obviously not a if you're not watching a documentary, it's like going to be made up. That's the same
Right.
thing in my mind with a fiction book. It's like a story that you're creating in your own head. It's like you have the imagination already. You're just getting the input of the storyline, and it's like it's wonderful. I mean, my favorite form of entertainment is fiction and sci-fi.
Mm.
Yeah.
So do you have a recommendation that you're either reading now or one of your?
Well, I'll always this one will always be my favorite, but like, and it's just a very cliched opinion, but Harry Potter, I read that once a year, the whole series. Like something changes every year when I read it. But yeah, it's like, I grew up with that book, so with that series, and same with
Mhm.
my brother. That was one of the biggest things we bonded on over. So we both read it every year once.
Well, and it is pretty. I have to say, I read not all of the books to my kids, but I
Mm.
definitely read, I think, the first one or two, definitely the first one, and maybe part of the second one. But
Got you.
those are just they are just magical and really transport you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a great
Also
recommendation.
love the dystopian type of books, so those are always pretty solid.
So which ones do you like of that?
Um well, of course, there's like 1984, there's Animal Farm. Yeah, I would say George Orwell is like probably, that's what, like, right off the top of my head. But yeah, I don't want to spend too much time. I'm sure we have a lot that we want
Oh
to
yeah,
discuss,
well,
but
it's always
uh
fun to talk about books. I could,
yeah, I could talk about books forever.
I
So
could spend my life reading. It's
yeah.
I just love it. But I also love music. So just tell me what you're listening to right now that is kind of one of your
Oh,
favorites.
like literally right now next to
Yes.
me, that is, like, I paused to pick up this to join this call, was Travis Scott. He's a hip
Mhm.
hop artist.
Yeah.
Um I enjoy various different, like, I mean, within hip hop is my favorite genre. I listen to basically everything, every genre, but within hip hop there are also a lot of subgenres. I really appreciate some of the more conscious rap, as well as trap. Trap is basically more higher hi-hats, more frequency of hi-hats, and higher frequency of bass, more bass essentially. So
So is trap more kind of Atlanta based, or is
trap,
that
like, it this is a arguable statement, but it, like, technically is like around in Atlanta, started up in Atlanta, in that area. Andre 3000, like Big Boy, so this is Outcast, these
right?
artists kind of like started the scene in the area. Of course, I mean, they're everywhere, but a lot of recently, in the last, like, I'd say 10-15 years, there's been a huge movement and evolution of trap music in Atlanta, where we're seeing a lot of new producers making just unbelievable sounds. So it's like a hub of music down there. But
Yeah.
essentially, yeah, they just characterize trap with three things, like the drums, which are supposed to be frequent hi-hats, and like in triplets,
Mhm.
the kick drum and bass, and then also triplet flows. So the flow in rapping is actually slightly different. So yeah, that is, like, I mean, of course there's many more genres, but I also enjoy listening to artists like Kendrick Lamar, J Rock, J Cole, of course, like Beyonce, a lot of underground artists, if I mention. Yeah, I mean, I could, again, same as book, I could go on for
We could go
like
down a rabbit
hours.
hole.
I could go on for hours, but I just, thought I'd mention a couple of artists at the least.
Oh yeah. Well, I definitely, I think that one of the things that I enjoy most about rap, and I am thinking specifically right now of Kendrick Lamar, is I love, it's such incredible poetry.
Exactly. His
And
album won a Pulitzer, actually.
oh, yeah, that's right. I think
Yeah,
I did read that and I forgot it, but it's so, and then also just the storytelling quality,
exactly, exactly.
I think is so powerful. And so it's and I feel
It,
like we learn so much from stories,
exactly.
right?
It kind of ties into my whole mission with my clinical psychology, therapy, social work, everything that I intend to do and I am doing. Um, I mean, I appreciate hip hop the most. The reason why I like it the most is because you're getting these perspectives from people that you wouldn't necessarily. I'm privileged. I acknowledge that I'm privileged, and I'm living in an area that is, well, now is not that safe, but I have grown up in an area that's relatively like safe, and not a lot going on. But in terms of income disparity, in terms of socioeconomic disparities, in terms of just generally the government, like the systemic oppression, the systemic racism that kind of happens. There are a lot of stories that we're not necessarily hearing that we should. It's our obligation, it's our responsibility to know these things as fellow human beings. But I really appreciate hip hop because there's this sense of like a raw, direct sort of channel of communication between these artists that are just geniuses, some of the smartest people I've met, some of the most analytical and passionate people I've met or that I've ever heard. I wish I met them. But
One day.
yeah, one day that I've heard. So that's why I really appreciate listening to hip hop. It's just kind of, it constantly enhances my work, my vision, my goals, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. So if going back to books, if we think you mentioned Roald Dahl, for instance. So if you think about a book or a story from childhood that either you read or that was read to you or told to you, is there one that you can think of that has kind of still significance for you today?
Yes. I would say, like, just from Roald Dahl, James and the Giant Peach. I think that's one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh that definitely. There's another one even more specific that I really I haven't read children books has been a while. I used to actually also read books in Sanskrit, read like comics,
Uh-huh.
these we used to get these like comics in English and Sanskrit from India. So that's what I'd read a lot of that when I was younger, and until I started reading like nonfiction and like just, older books. But yeah, I think I would say probably, in my opinion, James and the Giant Peach would be the best. I'm looking up the other one, but yeah, we can continue. I'll tell you as soon as I find it.
Oh yeah. Well, just tell me. So what, I mean, I know how much I love Roald Dahl and I love and James and the Giant Peach is such a really incredible
Of course, and
story.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Oh,
Yes.
oh yeah, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. There's one that was the elevator.
Right, right.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was my
And
favorite, hands down.
okay. So what was your favorite about that?
I liked the I liked the way the book was written.
Mhm.
I was a kid. It felt like I was being transported like with the character. And I mean, it's very imaginative. So I definitely felt like I was stimulated by that. It felt comforting to read. But I mean, honestly, again, I have to say, like, that the first Harry Potter book, I keep going, even if, like, when I first could start reading, like three or four, like four or five, that's when I started, when I picked up that book. So that is, like, I would remember from the beginning, like, of my childhood. I so clearly remember where I was sitting, what I was doing anytime I was reading that book.
So what do you think in terms of whether it's your undergrad degree of biopsychology or your current PhD studies or even your research that you're doing is I find it kind of fascinating how like terrifying so many children's books are.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
like, and what is like, and I remember as a kid loving that. And especially as a book, I'm not necessarily loving it in terms of scary movies, like
Mhm.
not the visual thing, but
Yeah,
in a
I wasn't able
book,
to watch scary movies until I was like
no.
16.
So, well, I know my mom didn't want me to watch scary
Yeah.
movies till I was like 25, but I kind of snuck out once in a while. And
That's funny.
but I mean, what is it about? What is there something in your that you've come across in your research or your studies or your reading that talks about kind of those really scary stories, or even if you think of just the casual Disney film or the fairy tales that most
Yeah.
kids in the United States digest have
So
this very terrifying element.
I can definitely tell you my like I haven't done research into it, like looked up like articles or read textbooks,
Yeah.
but from my experience and my knowledge of psychology, and clinical psychology, developmental psychology, I can probably give you an answer. So I think it's actually not bad at all. There's a reason why a lot of these are rated G or PG, and that means
Mhm.
children can watch them. I mean, the rating system, I forgot exactly what the board is called, but they
Yeah,
actually are.
G is general audience,
Yeah, yeah, but
which means
I mean
it.
the
Oh, yeah,
institution in charge of like putting like
right.
rating those, but I'm sure they wouldn't let like children watch something unless they've done extensive research into seeing what kind of content, like they have guidelines that are okay for like children or adolescents to watch. Now that being said, I also grew up in that generation where I watched a show called Ed, Ed and Eddie, which in it was in my in on CNN or on Cartoon Network when I was like, growing up, like 4 to 7 years old, 4 to 8 years old. Um, and the premise of the show was essentially a bunch of kids that were in purgatory, literally in purgatory. It was like it
So
was
they're
all,
dead.
yeah,
They're dead kids.
we don't know, technically they're dead, yeah, but
Okay.
they're in
Yeah.
purgatory. They're it's like completely no adults there. It's all animated. It's like completely animated. It's like cartoon. So
Yeah.
and they would be doing, now I went back and looked, watched a couple of episodes of the show like 10 years later, and I was like, one, that was a lot of very suggestive stuff in there that I just completely would have missed as a kid. And two, there are a lot of really dark themes and really dark things in there. But I find myself even today referring to that and talking about certain themes that I found compelling and relevant in my day-to-day today. Right. So
Hmm.
I found personally that I did watch things like horror movies growing up sometimes. Like I even if I watched a trailer for a horror movie, I wouldn't be able to sleep for like 3 nights, right?
Yeah.
Um, but or sometimes once I watched it for The Exorcist, I watched a trailer for the remake and I couldn't sleep for 2 months, for 2 weeks.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I couldn't enter a door without like looking up into the corner. But like what I think is, some kids, they kind of grow out of it. Some kids, they and for me, I personally, I grew out of it completely. I can watch just about anything and it doesn't affect me later on. Also obviously, getting busy and all that stuff kind of makes a difference because you kind of just watch something and then you move on.
Yeah.
But for kids, I think it's actually good to have something like a little more realistic, a little more, not just like, all just fairy tales and all smiles, because to be fair, it's good to start seeing at a younger age, when you have parental support, you have family around you, what, like, the real world is like. So I think it's good that, I don't think kids should just, ultimately I don't think kids should be sheltered too much. I grew up not being sheltered. I can tell now a huge part of it is a part of the mental health rates in adolescence increasing. Like it's shot up. It's actually
Mhm.
a problem. It has to do with kids not going outside anymore, spending most of their time on social media, etc. So I mean, honestly, just even getting back to the era of just like sitting down in front of TV if your parents are at work for like 3 hours and watching something, even that's better than just like going on to social media or whatever. But yeah, I think it's important that kids do get exposure, start getting exposure to that kind of stuff, and it can be harmful. Down the line, if it does stick with you, you end up traumatized from something. There's always therapy. So
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I do think it's really fascinating when you think of kind of the content for kids, and I agree with you. I think it is healthy, and I think that there is kind of when you're younger, you know, to be reading those or watching some of those
exactly.
cartoons or movies that are a little bit have some kind of darker themes, and just kind of with the safety net, hopefully,
Yeah,
of your family.
exactly. And I mean, parental controls on TV, like nothing over G,
Yeah,
until parents are home, all that. Like, I mean, I have little cousins and my uncles do that now. Back when I was a kid, my parents never bothered or did any of that. But now my
yeah,
uncles, and they have like, I know TVs and whatnot have time settings where you can only
right,
watch for
right.
like an hour or two. So I know you can do a lot of that. So maybe that's an option for any listeners that might not have thought of it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's pivot a little bit
Yes.
and talk about, if to date, I realize you're a young man with a long career ahead of you, but if there was one word that you could use to describe your professional life to date, what would that be?
Um, I would say outreach and research. Like I'm a researcher. Like just so my career now is research. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean,
So
just and also, I mean, I think those are an interesting couple of words, outreach and research, because in some ways there's a I don't know, research in a certain context I think of as being a rather solo
so that
endeavor.
goes into my my job, like what why I so obviously research for my PhD, learning and research, and for
Right.
my work, and then for work also I travel. Well, one the my work entails I have a couple of people that work with like under like for me, essentially some volunteers. um so my work actually entails finding research grants, putting together general research proposals and projects,
Okay.
attending conferences and presenting at conferences. And then that, I guess that would be outreach. And then
Hmm.
additionally, another part of my work involved, and then doing research projects, connecting with universities, et cetera. And then another part of my work entails me traveling to other countries. Recently, because of COVID, I haven't gone to do it, but I traveled to Trinidad and Tobago
Mm.
and trained a group of 10 yoga instructors, as a group of 10 people who were
Hmm.
wanted to be certified yoga instructors, right before COVID happened. So
Oh, fantastic.
I was there for a month actually. So we have a couple other trips coming up to like to keep training. So the way our training model is we're a Yoga Alliance certified school, so
Okay.
we can train people to become registered yoga teachers. And they can and they would register once they get our certificate. They can register with Yoga Alliance and get
Hmm.
their teaching certification. So all the studios and stuff that you would see here in like in any city or in like gyms, usually the teacher is a RYT certified instructor. So there I've had 1200 hours experience teaching.
Wow.
So well, now it should be somewhere like 1500. But so as a result, I have I'm certified. I have an ERYT 200, meaning I'm certified to teach people how to become yoga instructors. Like I am certified to teach that course.
Wow. Okay.
So what we do is we teach online about all of there's like a certain number of contact like in-person hours we have to do, which is like something like 30 hours. So
Hmm.
we travel to another country and do like an in-person 1 week long workshop, and then the rest we just do online every weekend, and some self-study as well. So that's how we train our yoga teachers and our yoga therapists. um,
Okay.
so we have students in all over the country. We have students in India. We have students in the Caribbeans, and we're just picking up more and more students every we run them every 2 months. So
Mhm.
we're just every 2 months we're picking up more and more. In fact, right before I was hopping on here, I was just setting up Google ads to run some ads for our, since it's working well, some run some ads
Yeah.
for our training services. So yeah, it's definitely, my job is a lot of different things. But yeah, hopefully that was able to answer your question.
Well, and so what is, talk to me a little bit. I just actually noticed that a local yoga studio here in Southern California is
Hmm.
offering yoga therapy, which was not something I hadn't necessarily, I
Heard of
think of
it.
yoga as being
Yeah.
therapeutic in a way, but specifically yoga therapy. Can you talk to me about what the
Thank you.
difference?
That is a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful question, and I would love to explain and get the platform to explain that. So the way I like to think of yoga is the Western world sees yoga as just another form of exercise, like Pilates, Zumba, whatever that might be. Just, some increased flexibility, less cardio.
Right.
The Eastern world, for the most part, sees yoga as maintaining positive health, both physically and mentally. So, yoga, it doesn't just involve physical postures and all of that, but it also involves a lot of meditation, breathing. It's actually, the physical postures are they add up to your there's supposed to be preparatory practices for you to get to a state of like your mind being calm and stable before you start your practices, your meditation practices. So
Okay.
that's the purpose of yoga, the original purpose. Now, what we've done, what yoga practitioners and scholars have done since early, for as long as we can remember, since BC era. But the Patanjali is one of the first sages to document this. His name is Sage Patanjali. He wrote a book of around 8,000 sutras. Sutras are like little phrases.
Mhm.
And each one explains the different purpose of like how to practice yoga, why to practice yoga, what yoga is, like what is the benefits, what can it be used for, how do you control the mind, all of these things. And like I was mentioning previously, it's one of those scriptural texts. So a lot of people actually have a book that is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras translated. So it's usually someone that is a Sanskrit scholar will go ahead, and there are a lot of translations, but we'll go ahead and like translate the each sutra and
Mhm.
then write out the like their interpretation of it. So same thing with the Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm.
A lot of people, a lot of scholars do that as well. So that is how it originally kind of started. Um, Now that's how the science was kind of started to get aggregated. That was
Mhm.
before the scientific revolution in the 1600s. Post scientific revolution, the Eastern world, mostly that was happening in the Western world. The Eastern world was kind of hugely disregarded, not taken seriously, but they were always consistently doing their own research. And especially, at least I know about India well, so I'll talk about that. India's had universities for again BC era as well, but they started forming like the modern day universities around the 1800s, and started conforming to kind of that British like schooling system, et cetera, because colonialism. And then so what happened is around mid 1900s. One of our parent organization, S. Vyasa University, they're located in Bangalore.
Mhm.
They are a university, so they're a rehab facility in person, like a hospital, as
Okay.
well as a yoga, Ayurveda, so just allopathic medicine, Ayurvedic
Mhm.
medicine, naturopathic medicine, and yoga therapy. So it's like a full, thorough, healing, like full, like healing and rehabilitation hospital in like the outskirts, in the remote outskirts of Bangalore. It's this huge facility. There, they also have been doing research in yoga, and they train postgraduate students as well as doctoral, masters and doctoral students. So that's our parent organization. We started in 2002 in the United States as a student organization, or at least like the child organization from
Okay.
that organization. So they have been conducting research in the way that the Western world has been conducting psychological research and like life sciences research for the last like I'd say 60 years, 50 years or so. So you'd see some of the first seminal works in yoga and the effects of yoga. I haven't even gone to yoga therapy yet, but you see that in around the 70s and 80s, especially Dr. H.R. Nagaratna and her work. And then there are researchers in the West at Harvard, Stanford, Mayo Clinic, like it's various like very popular places that have started doing research in like the 80s and 90s. So now we see this whole worldwide. I've been to some international conferences now, but we're all throughout the world. People are taking up yoga and doing both subjective and like qualitative and quantitative research on yoga, publishing books on yoga throughout the like more and more every day. And then yoga therapy, what they do is they take that whole, so there's a whole set of practices, the whole, all like the toolbox of techniques, let's put it that way. Then what yoga therapy does is it will pick from that toolbox. It's like, imagine like a medicine cabinet. It'll pick the like medicines that like the techniques and the plan that you would need for, as per your ailment. And this is all backed up. This is all backed in research and literature. So let's say you have back pain. Let's just say, I mean, let's just say you suffer from chronic back pain. There's plenty of research that shows what type of yoga practices and what type of yoga regimens can help improve things like back pain and actually give you a benefit. So we have our yoga therapy services wing as well. So we do one-on-one sessions with clients where our trained yoga therapists, not our teachers, but our therapists, they go through like, it's like yogic science. They go through the like essentially like physiology training, anatomy training, psychology training, they like everything. So it's like they work alongside with doctors as well. So they actually teach, they do one-on-one sessions with people. So that's what yoga therapy is. We have worked with almost every single ailment you could possibly think of, from like just like the general like chronic musculoskeletal pain to like diabetes, like endocrine disorders, obesity, hypertension, stress related disorders, every single type of mental health disorder, autoimmune and cancer, so ALS, various different types of cancer to improve, either help improve and come out of it or improve quality of life. So we have actually worked pretty much on everything, and I work mostly with the more challenging mental health related cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's really informative and really inspiring to know that there are alternative ways of treating some of the more kind of common ailments that we sometimes just end up taking medications for or whatever. It's I guess the thing that strikes me is that it's a very for the patient, so to speak, it's a very empowering approach.
Exactly. We've noticed a huge benefit, especially when I was in Trinidad and Tobago. We did, after that training the teachers, we did the Stop Diabetes movement, which we partner with another nonprofit called Seva International, and they provide they send us over to these countries to train some of their volunteers. So after that, we did this SDM program, Stop Diabetes Movement, where we had two doctors with us that we trained. So we actually took all of the, like, we did a full study pre and like we took like their blood sugar, HbA1c, asked them to log their daily heart rate and everything. And by the end of it, we noticed a huge reduction in like huge improvements across the board, statistically significant improvements. And then additionally, in between, in the first 2 days, after the first 2 days, one person, actually, a couple of people came up to us and asked if they could reduce their metformin dosage. And we were like, no, you can't, because we need like one, like you need to talk to your doctor.
Right,
And
right.
two, like we need like consistent data, and we don't want the metformin to get in the way. But they were like, we actually feel like we're taking too much metformin. So what do we do? So we had them talk to the doctor, our doctors that we had there. So yeah, it's really beneficial. I was on The Guardian in Trinidad and Tobago on live TV, and I conducted a 10-minute yoga session wearing a suit on like behind like a chair with like a mic on and everything.
Yeah.
And we got calls from all over the like the little island. And the best one was an 80 or I think a 72-year-old woman called and said she practiced with us for like watching TV with me
Yeah.
for 10 minutes. And this is the most relief she's felt in 40 years of having diabetes. And that was 10 minutes of practice of just breathing and light stretching, like what I'm doing right here on a chair, and like
Yeah.
slight movements. Like that's like basically it.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it's quite incredible. So the testimonies there, the anecdotes are there, the like the research is definitely there. That's like not even a concern. But there's definitely more and more money flowing in, and I think people are starting to realize just that reactionary approach to medicine isn't going to keep working. It's definitely going to, you know, reduce lifespan. The side effects are going to be terrible. Your quality of life is going to go down. So to kind of just help with, like, as an adjunct treatment, we always say an adjunct treatment, yoga therapy is always really beneficial. Also just generally yoga practice, in like daily yoga practice is great. You can check out our website, yogabharati.org. We have a lot of options. We offer online classes on a daily schedule, and we offer like a monthly membership. You can just pay and sign up, join any of our classes, and we have teachers teaching every day. So and like I think 3 times a day. So yeah, definitely, if and anyone listening is
well, I'll make sure and put that in the notes
yeah,
for the episode. Well, and I'll make sure we've touched on a lot of things that I'm going to include in our notes. A last couple of questions here.
absolutely.
So one of the things that I am always thinking about in terms of my work with my coaching clients and my business owners in particular are thinking about our blind spots and bright spots. And so kind of do you, and then kind of coupled with that is the whole title of the Learning to Swim interview series, which is really refers to kind of those gifts that we have that we don't necessarily recognize.
Yes.
So but I think given your background and your field of study, I'm guessing you have a pretty good awareness of yourself and your talents. So what is kind of your in plain sight talent? I mean, what's something that most people who know you would recognize as they'd say, Chinmay, he's,
I'd say magnetic and collaborative, like very, very easy to collaborate. Magnetic, collaborative, and a leader. So most people in my life, I think they look at me as as the leader. I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything here,
no.
but yeah, yeah. But I would say like definitely magnetic, collaborative, passionate, and the leader.
And what's more of a hidden talent that someone might not see on the surface?
I'm a great teacher.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I'm a great teacher. So, I mean, ultimately, I've been teaching since I was 11 or 12. I taught Sanskrit first, and then I taught yoga for a while, and then in college I taught for a little bit, and then now I might be picking up a job as a TA soon. But aside from that, I've also taught yoga instructor courses, and then also just generally, teaching friends how to drive, like simple things like that, and without them being scared. Like, like just being helpful with when someone doesn't know how to do something, instead of just doing it for them, unless they absolutely need it in the time being, teaching them how to do things, and just teaching in general. Yeah.
So what would be your tip to people who are in a position, maybe in the workplace, or perhaps there's folks who just want to help out amongst their peer group? what's a tip for being a good teacher? Like what makes a good teacher?
Patience. Number one thing is patience. So I would say, if you want to be a good teacher, you have to understand that that students are going to take their time. It's better. Every student is different and they take their time. It's better if you are as patient as you can be. It's counterproductive to not be, or your students aren't going to learn fast. But yeah, I would say patience is key.
Well, thank you. That is a great note for us to wrap up on. And I so thank you for all of your insights and sharing about yourself today and your journey. And I know there's so much more to come for you. So it's a really exciting time for you. Congratulations.
It's my pleasure, Kristan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. And if you liked this, please subscribe to the channel, and there will be more Learning to Swim coming your way. Thank you. Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.